Hi, and welcome to Generation Wisdom. I'm Tom.
I'm Ox.
In Judaism, the first 5 books of the Old Testament are known as the Torah, and the English translation of the word Torah is teaching or law. God gave the 10 Commandments to the people of Israel and Moses just after he freed them from Egypt.
And today we plan to each pick one of the commandments to talk about. And, the 10 Commandments, a lot has been written about them. And we originally planned to talk about all of them, but it would be too exhausting of a task. So we figured that each of us talking about one would be the best way to approach this.
Yeah, so Alex and I thought, which one would speak to us, right? Which one spoke to us the most? And I actually, so that we didn't pick the same commandment, because that would be kind of weird.
Yeah.
I actually told Alex which one that I would be discussing, and I asked him not to reveal his. So today, when he talks about his commandment that speaks to him, it'll be a surprise to me, just like it is to you. So, Alex, take it away.
So I'm going to be reading the second commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a graven image, nor any manner of likeness of anything that is in heaven above, that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord, your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children of the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto the thousandth generation of them that loves me, and keep my commandments. So, looking at this, I think there are about 3 or 4 ideas that are within this commandment. First is that there is no other God than me. There's only one God, no multiple gods. And I think we can understand the importance of this when we just think about in our practical lives what happens when we don't have one thing that we put above everything else. Because there are very few things that we can find in life that cause us to have a sense of order, balance, and groundedness in our life. We are surrounded by plurality. We're surrounded by change. And we want to find something which brings us security in one thing that allows everything to be in harmony. And I think the deeper and deeper we search, the more we find that we have a craving for something which does not change. And we're all on a journey and trying to find exactly what that is. And part of the commandments that it teaches us that, in fact, the answer to suffering, the answer to chaos is to find God, the one thing that does not change and is the foundation of peace. The next idea associated with this is that we are not supposed to have any representations of a God, whether this be something we worship that's made out of a statue, or even something that we associate with something in creation, something that's in the heavens as a bird, on the earth as a human being per se, or even something under the earth like a fish in the ocean. And I think what was very suggesting about this is that, we all have a craving to be associated with something which is transcendent of our own experience. But inevitably, God tends to reveal himself to us, or speak to us, metaphorically speaking, in a way which is through our experiences. Because if you imagine, if God is something that is completely transcendent, but at the same time we need that transcendent source, God has no other way to communicate with us other than what is within our own experience, or else we would have no guidance. And I think this is a valuable way to interpret this section, because if you go into the next idea associated in this verse, the idea that I, the Lord, am a jealous God. Now, what does jealousy mean? I think we can understand jealousy not in the typical human understanding of, say, one human being jealous of what someone else has and then stealing it from them, but jealousy in the sense of a bigger sense that, when you think about it, the initial reaction would be, why would God have to be jealous about anything? Because he's the source of everything. He has everything. He knows everything. He's all powerful. What does he have to worry about? But it's almost as if God knows somehow that human beings cannot directly see him. And he wished that human beings could directly see him, because he is the truth behind everything. And so he's like, why are they paying so much attention to what is in front of their eyes, but they can't see what's beyond their eyes? And so, in a way, this suggests a teaching that most of the religions have, that God is both transcendent and immanent. God's jealousy, in other words, is due to the fact that he's transcendent, because we can't access him, and so we worship things that we shouldn't be worshiping. But his jealousy also means that he makes himself immanent within the very things that we are limited to, because he wants us all to himself. So how does he do that? He gets into the very things which ironically sometimes take us away from him, take us away from peace and unity. And, the end of this commandment basically answers the idea that he is visiting us in this world, both those who have been immoral and both those who have been righteous. And so this is a paradox, because why would God only seem to be visiting those who, not only those who love and follow the commandments, but also those who do wrong things? Because if God truly wants all of us, he would have to find a way to be merciful and to understand why we do things that are wrong, so that we can learn and try to change our life. And so this means basically that God is with those who do wrong. God is with those who are lost. And that sense of mercy is part of the teaching of why in this commandment God is both visiting those who do wrong as well as those who try to do right. That's like a SparkNote version of the commandment. What do you think about that, Doug?
Yeah, I think that's very deep on a lot of levels. And if I know in today's video, we're picking which sort of the commandments we think is most important. I would also add that this seems to be the most important thing to God himself. It's the longest of the commandments. He spends the most time explaining this one. I think, the other ones are all very short, relatively speaking. And in this one, he clearly elaborates quite a bit. And so, I think you've chosen one that God thinks is very, very important. They're all important. But I also think he sort of, it's a cautionary thing from God as well. He says, "For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children of the third and fourth generation of them that hate me." That's a pretty strong warning. That he wants your love. He wants our love. So I thought that was well done.
Thank you. Jill, it's your turn.
Okay. So I chose actually the 10th commandment, which reads, "You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, nor anything else that is your neighbor's." And the word covet, it can have a couple of meanings. Sort of casually coveting can just simply mean desiring what your neighbor has. Maybe you look over at your neighbor's house and you say, "My neighbor's got a great big house. I wish I had a house like that." That's not in and of itself necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes coveting in that regard can motivate you. If it motivates you in the right way, you can, say, well, what do I need to do to have a place like that of my own, or to have a car like that? Or, I need to get an education, and I need to get a job, and I need to work hard, and I need to get married and have a family, and so that I can have the same happiness as my neighbor. So that in itself, a coveting in that regard is not harmful. But I think here what God refers to is when it goes beyond that, coveting, that simple desire, to the point of wanting to possess something that's not yours. Okay. You should not be desiring or taking anything that isn't yours, that doesn't rightfully belong to you. And there's the list, your neighbor's wife, manservant, maidservant, and the list goes on. That is an unhealthy, almost evil sort of coveting. And I explained a little bit to this to Alex. I thought that, coveting is sort of the root of all evil. When you think about it, this is the commandment where when you covet, the only person who knows about this is you and God, because it happens in your heart. God knows what's in your heart. And that's what this commandment is about. And so I also thought that when you look at all the commandments, and this is the 10th commandment, I thought of the 10 commandments sort of as a house of cards, if you will. And if you had God at the top, I am the Lord thy God, card number 1, and you took all the 10 cards of the commandments and you built a little house with the 10th commandment, coveting, being at the bottom. if you pulled that 10th one out, if you broke that one commandment, the house of cards would sort of fall in on each other. So to me, this 10th commandment was the foundation. And so I came up with a little fictitious scenario, but based in reality. It's what happens to a lot of people when they covet in an evil way. So think about this, and forgive me for referring to some of my notes, but let's say that you, or I, in this case, let's say I covet my neighbor's wife. I look over and I say, even though I'm married, man, she is beautiful, she is smart, and I need to do something about that. Not a good thing, obviously, because number one, I've broken the 10th commandment. I am coveting, and maybe it leads to adultery. Okay, maybe I have an affair. Okay, so I've already broken 2 commandments. You can see how coveting in the wrong way led to me breaking another commandment. Remember that house of cards. You pull that last commandment out and they all start to fall because they're all connected. That adultery leads to lying, bearing false witness. I start to lie to my wife. I start to lie to my kids. I start to lie to my neighbor. So there's another commandment down, knocked down. Maybe this betrayal leads to divorce. And in that case, in this country, you've stolen another man's wife. Maybe after the divorce is over, my neighbor's wife and I decide to get married, or she leaves him. I have flat out stolen something from my neighbor. Now, there's another commandment, thou shalt not steal. During the divorce, we may go to court. And here in the United States, what we do is when we are about to testify in court, we put our hand on a Bible and we say something to the effect of, in the open courtroom, do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And of course, the appropriate response is yes. So if you do that and then you continually lie on the stand, say, well, no, like it was her idea, I'm completely innocent, I didn't really do anything, I couldn't help it, she came at me constantly, and hey, started to tell all sorts of lies and excuses. Now since you made that promise in the open courtroom with your hand on a Bible, you have used God's name in vain. So there you go, there's another commandment that you have broken. And a lot of times with these affairs, they're so disastrous that, let's say, this person I had an affair with decides to get back together with my neighbor's wife. And I am so enraged that I murdered a husband because of a jealous rage. Well, then, of course, that's another commandment down in that house of cards. And, this may seem a little crazy, but this is terrible behavior. So I can't imagine that I am honoring my parents. I'm sure that most parents are not raising their kids to be adulterous, lying, murdering, stealing people who use God's name in vain. So that's why, I decided to pick the 10th commandment. So I hope you found... I'm sorry. Do you have anything to add about that?
I like the idea that you were able to tie all these commandments together. I definitely agree that this tends to be what happened from the perspective of the 10th commandment, that coveting tends to be almost the origin of all the other sins. And then when you fall one, it becomes easier to fall the other ones. I think we all we wouldn't be surprised to find that most people are in similar situations where we see how one vice or breaking one commandment leads to us breaking the other ones. I just wanted to say that, in Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah, they believe that the 10 commandments are related to the symbol called the tree of life. And the tree of life is basically a symbol about the relationship between the created world, human beings, and God. And this symbol contains 10 sephiroths, or 10 circles of energy, which is basically, they associate the 10 commandments with each of these parts. And each of these parts in the tree are related to Adam and Eve in their original unity. And the commandments, I guess we can say, is a way for us to return back to that kind of Edenic mode of being, where we were at harmony with everything in the created world. And so the commandments are a way in which we return back to that harmony.
Good. Yeah. I think it's also, the 10 commandments are sort of the bedrock. This is where these are God's foundational laws. But those of you who are familiar with the Old Testament know that there are far more laws that God creates. I think in the Torah there are a little over 600 various laws, but this is the beginning. This is where it begins. And I think the other thing that makes them special is that according to the Torah, in the book of Exodus and Deuteronomy, these laws were written by the finger of God. These are not necessarily words spoken to Moses and then passed down. They were literally written on the tablets by God. That is the biblical narrative. So in that regard, they're special.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we always have this concept in other religions that God has revealed certain rules to a certain prophet for all of humanity to receive guidance. And, just thinking right now, the fact that you mentioned this is almost as if there is a way of being in which we realize these prophets within ourselves who receive the laws, because in a sense, what did Moses have to go through in order to be able to receive these rules? He had to be tested. He had to rise to a mountain, which means he had to go through so much stress inwardly and outwardly in order to get to the point where he would be receptive to whatever God could reveal to him for the betterment of humankind. And this, in a way, is sort of like a microcosm of what Joseph Campbell calls the hero's journey. Basically that we leave comfort, we go through discomfort, and then through attaining what it is that is special for us by being selfless and humble, we receive a gift. And doing that, we return back to the world at the bottom of the mountain, and then we share the goods that we have been granted from the source of life. So in a sense, Moses' life is the life we all, in a way, kind of meant to live. And following the commandments is, I guess you could say, the road to following that life.
Sure. I think a lot of atheists would say, well, I don't really need these commandments. I know about, I know murder's wrong, and I know, coveting is wrong, and I know, but I think that, with the Ten Commandments being given by God, you need, what it says is, if these were just laws made by man, they would be up for debate. These would just be people's opinions. Maybe someone justifies murder, but I don't, or stealing. But knowing these come from God, a higher authority, they're not up for debate. And these are God's laws, and they need to be followed. And where am I going with this? I think, there are some things that in society, and I'm speaking of the society I live in the United States, some things are immoral, but not against the law. And that's what separates it. And God's morality, the morality of the Ten Commandments, always needs to supersede the law. Okay? I'm trying to think of a quick example. Cheating on your spouse. Okay? Let's say you have an affair, as I spoke about, and on your spouse, and that's not against the law. Okay? People get divorced and the judge doesn't say, well, since you cheated on your spouse, she's going to get all the money and the house and the kids. It's not how it works. The law, protects the children no matter, whether the husband or the wife had an affair. It's not how it works. It's not against the law. The husband doesn't go to jail. It's not against the law, but it is against God's laws. It is morally wrong.
Yeah, but I think in most situations, it's not that the law is trying to cancel out the ethics that God has revealed to us. It's more like the law is meant to serve as a way for God's rules to be applied in unique situations, because it's not enough just to know about the Ten Commandments, it's also knowing how they apply. Because whenever you deal with sticky situations and where there are unique circumstances, you almost need people who not only know the Ten Commandments, but know the uniqueness of different situations so they can apply the law in ways which make sense. Otherwise, this has been the role of scholars in all religions, Islam, Judaism, even Hinduism, where these legal schools have their differences in how they apply the law. And yeah, I emphasize this because there isn't supposed to be a break between the law and the rule and God's laws, because, and this isn't a critique of Christianity, kind of had a different path from both religions in the sense that it's kind of separated, separated the law, the legal tradition that they sort of inherited from Judaism, but they kind of left it up to society to determine the laws for themselves. whether they be with Charlemagne or different kings and queens throughout history. And it was because of this separation that ironically led birth to the modern world. You know, the modern world never would have arisen out of any other religion other than Christianity, partly for the reason that it has part of the reason that Christianity does not have a very broad legal tradition that is instituted by the religion as compared to, say, Judaism or Islam. But it's not a critique, it's just a unique evaluation of the religion.
Do you think, it's just a question, do you think there are levels of breaking these commandments? I mean, I kind of think there are. I mean, I think there are serious infractions of the commandments which are, I don't want to use the word unforgivable, but some are more egregious than others, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on Jewish law, but for the sake of Islamic law, they make distinctions between, what would be considered forbidden, what is considered to be obligatory, what is recommended, and what is not recommended. And so, as long as what is followed, what is followed and what is forbidden is almost always very clear and can almost always be determined from Scripture and from the rules that God has revealed. But for the things that what is recommended and what may not be recommended, these are up for debate for the most part. But, of course, in the end, they always have to be grounded in revelation. Still, scholars need to be able to be astute enough to be able to be aware of the uniqueness of different situations and all the things that are very complicated we can't completely go into. But we hope that these discussions that we've had with these two commandments have opened your eyes and maybe begin to appreciate kind of the origin of all Western ethics, really.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time I've ever really taken a serious look at the Ten Commandments. Is that the same for you, Alex?
Yeah, I never investigated the Ten Commandments at this level before.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of them. Most people are aware of them. And, as growing up Greek Orthodox, I went to Sunday school, and of course we learned them. But of course, when you're 6 years old or 7 years old, you don't have an in-depth discussion. And I'm actually glad that Alex and I didn't try to tackle all 10 in one video, because I'm staring at our video camera right now and it says we've been talking for 24 minutes and all we did was tackle 2 of them. So you can see why we chose to do it this way. And I think in the future, on Generation Wisdom, we will eventually circle back. I mean, I think we're trying to go through all the various religions. I would love it if we turn our attention towards philosophy a little bit next. We've gone through poetry, and we'll probably circle back and talk about the other commandments in time. Don't you think?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
All right. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you later.
All right.